You know what's worse than catching your fiancé cheating? Catching her with the one girl she always swore was just a friend. That was my Friday night standing frozen in our shared apartment, holding takeout bags that still smelled of sesame chicken, while the sound of their laughter from the bedroom gutted me alive. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the food. I didn't even ask why. I just turned around, shut the door so quietly it made me sick, and walked down the cold Manhattan street with a ring still burning a circle into my finger. By the time I reached the corner, I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was thinking about revenge. Her name was Julia Bennett, my fiancé's rival. A woman so rich, so polished, so untouchably powerful in the business world that everyone in New York either feared her or envied her. My ex hated her with a venom I never understood. And in that moment all I knew was this. If I was going to fall apart, I wanted to fall apart in front of someone who would make her suffer for it. Julia Bennett wasn't someone you casually reached out to. She was the kind of woman whose face appeared on Forbes covers, and whose company dictated the future of tech investments. She wasn't just wealthy, she was a force of nature. The kind of person who could walk into a boardroom of arrogant old men and silence them with a glance. So when I emailed her assistant that night half drunk, mascara streaked across my face, typing with shaking hands, I expected silence. Or maybe if I was lucky, a polite rejection. Instead, the reply came back within 20 minutes. Julia Bennett. Meet me tomorrow. Noon. My office. My heart slammed against my ribs. I didn't know if I was terrified or thrilled. Maybe both. Her office was at the top of a skyscraper, the kind of place that made me feel small just walking into the lobby. Glass, marble, clean lines everywhere, like power itself had been distilled into architecture. When the elevator doors slid open, she was already there, waiting. And God, she was breathtaking. Sharp black hair brushed against her jawline. Her tailored charcoal gray suit hugging her frame like it had been designed just to worship her body. She wasn't smiling. But her eyes, deep, dark, calculating, held me still as though she already knew everything I had come to say. You're late, she said smoothly, though I wasn't. Sorry, I stammered, clutching my purse tighter. She studied me in silence, and in that pause I realized something startling. She wasn't cold. She wasn't cruel. She was curious. Like I was some unexpected puzzle that had landed in her world. So, she said at last, leaning back against her desk. Why did you reach out to me? The words burned in my throat, but I forced them out. Because I want her to regret ever hurting me. And you're the one person she hates more than anyone else. Her brow arched. Then, unbelievably, she laughed. It wasn't soft, it was low, sharp, the kind of laugh that sliced the air in half. My, that is delicious. I should have felt ashamed, standing there like some broken-hearted girl begging for scraps of vengeance. But Julia had this way of looking at me that made shame impossible. Her gaze stripped me bare, but not in a cruel way. More like she was deciding whether I was worth saving. She walked toward me, slow, deliberate. When she stopped just inches away, I could smell her perfume, something expensive like jasmine and firewood. Tell me, she murmured, her voice dropping low. What do you want from me exactly? My money? My power? Or just my name to throw in her face? I swallowed hard. My chest felt too tight. I want to feel like I matter. Like I wasn't nothing. Her expression softened. For the first time, Julia Bennett looked less like a billionaire CEO, and more like a woman, someone who understood betrayal too. You're not nothing, she said quietly. And somehow those 3 words cracked something wide open in me. Lunch that day wasn't lunch at all. She poured me whiskey instead. Expensive enough to burn my throat in a way that felt like cleansing fire. She listened, not just the polite kind of listening people do, but really listened as I told her everything. The proposal, the promises, the lies, the way I walked in and found it all crumbling in a single instant. When I finally stopped talking, my voice hoarse, Julia leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. She betrayed you. She underestimated you. And now she's going to learn the cost of that mistake. The words should have sounded vindictive. Instead, they sounded like a promise. I didn't know when it happened, maybe when her hand brushed mine as she refilled my glass, or when her eyes softened at my brokenness, but somewhere between pain and whiskey, something dangerous sparked inside me. I wasn't just drawn to Julia because of revenge. I was drawn to her because she made me feel alive again. The following weeks blurred together in a haze of unexpected closeness. She started inviting me to dinners, parties, events where I walked beside her in borrowed gowns and designer heels that made me stumble. Everyone stared, whispered, speculated. Julia didn't care. She held my hand in public as if daring anyone to question her. First, I thought she was using me, that I was just a pawn in her war against my ex. But then there were moments, quiet, fleeting moments that told a different story. Like when she draped her jacket over my shoulders one night because I was shivering, and her hand lingered just a second too long on my back. Or when I caught her watching me laugh at something stupid, and her eyes softened with something I couldn't name. And then there was the night it all broke open. We were on her penthouse balcony, the city glowing beneath us like a sea of stars. I was tipsy, barefoot, leaning against the railing while the wind tangled my hair. She stepped beside me, her glass untouched, her gaze steady on me. "Do you know what you're doing to me?" she asked softly. I turned, startled. "What do you mean?" Her jaw tightened. For once, Julia Bennett looked almost vulnerable. "You walked into my office like a storm, and I thought you were just another mess I could control. But you're not. You're undoing me." My breath caught. "Julia." Before I could finish, she closed the distance. One hand at the back of my neck, the other at my waist, and then her lips were on mine, fierce, consuming, like she'd been holding back for far too long. And I kissed her back with everything I had left. That night changed everything. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about her wealth or her power. It was about the way she looked at me like I wasn't broken. The way she touched me like I was worth worshipping. For the first time since my world had collapsed, I felt like I belonged. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because if loving Julia Bennett meant war with my past, then I was ready to burn the whole city down. The kiss should have ruined me. Instead, it ignited me. When Julia's lips left mine that night on the balcony, I wasn't the same woman anymore. The girl who had walked into her office broken, begging for scraps of vengeance, had been reborn into someone new, someone who wasn't afraid of desire. Someone who had just tasted what it meant to be wanted by a woman like Julia Bennett. But reality has a cruel way of sneaking back in, and it didn't take long before the first blow landed. It came 2 mornings later, in the form of a headline splashed across the New York Chronicle. "Billionaire Julia Bennett spotted with mystery woman. Rebound or power play?" My stomach dropped. The photo showed us on her balcony, her hand cupping my face, the city glowing behind us. It wasn't the kiss, thank God, but it was intimate enough that anyone could see what was brewing. By the time I finished reading, my phone was buzzing with texts from friends, coworkers, even my mother. The last one, though, was from my ex-fiancé. "Wow. Julia Bennett? Really? That's how low you'll go." I didn't answer. But Julia saw the article too. By noon, she'd summoned me to her office again. Her expression unreadable. "Are you scared?" she asked, sliding the newspaper across her desk. I forced myself to meet her gaze. Should I be? A flicker of something, approval? Admiration? Passed across her face. Good. Because this is only the beginning. Julia was right. The city buzzed with whispers about us. Business blogs speculated if I was her latest strategy to humiliate her rivals. Gossip columns painted me as some opportunistic girl who had traded heartbreak for a billionaire's bed. Stung. God, it stung. But every time I faltered, Julia steadied me. She would curl an arm around my waist at events, introduce me not as a friend, but as someone very important to me, and silence entire rooms with the steel in her voice whenever anyone dared to ask questions that cut too deep. Still, the war wasn't just outside, it was inside me too. I'd lie awake at night in her penthouse, staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me and wonder, was I just her weapon? Was this really love? Or was I fooling myself with the softness she only showed in private? And then she would stir, her arm draping over my waist, pulling me against her with unconscious tenderness, and I'd think, maybe, just maybe, this was real. But the true storm came when my ex decided she'd had enough of watching from the sidelines. It was a Friday night gala, one of those glittering events filled with Manhattan's elite. I was in a sapphire blue gown Julia had insisted on buying for me, the fabric clinging in ways that made me self-conscious until she leaned in and whispered, "You look like you own the room." For the first hour, it felt almost magical dancing with her under chandeliers, sipping champagne, laughing like the world wasn't watching us. And then she walked in. My ex. Her name still stung when I thought it, Claire. She strode across the ballroom like she belonged there, her arm linked with some hedge fund air, her smile venomous as soon as her eyes locked on me. Well, well, she purred when she reached us. Trading up, I see. Julia stiffened beside me, her hand tightening on my waist. Careful, she said smoothly, her tone edged with ice. You're speaking to someone who matters to me. Claire smirked, eyes glittering with malice. Oh, Julia. You really think she's not using you the same way she used me? The words sliced me open, even though I knew they were lies. I tried to stay calm, to ignore her, but my voice shook when I answered. You don't get to talk about me anymore, Claire. Not after what you did. Her smirk faltered for just a second, and I saw the guilt she couldn't quite hide. But she recovered fast, leaning closer so only I could hear. She'll chew you up and spit you out. That's what she does. And then she was gone, swept back into the crowd, leaving me trembling. The rest of the night was a blur. Julia pulled me into a corner, her eyes blazing. Don't listen to her, she said fiercely. But I couldn't stop the words from tumbling out. What if she's right? What if I'm just a pawn to you? What if you wake up one day and realize I was never good enough to stand beside you? Julia's jaw clenched. For a terrifying moment she said nothing. Then she reached up, cupping my face in both hands, forcing me to meet her gaze. Listen to me, she said, her voice shaking in a way I'd never heard before. I don't give a damn what anyone else thinks. You matter to me. Do you understand? You matter. And just like that, the fear cracked. My throat tightened, tears burning my eyes, and before I could stop myself I whispered, Then don't let me go. Her lips found mine again. There in the corner of that glittering ballroom, as if to seal the promise. Cameras flashed. People gasped. But in that moment none of it mattered. If the scandal had been loud before, it became deafening after that night. The kiss hit every front page, every gossip site, every trending feed. The mystery was over. I wasn't just Julia's shadow anymore. I was her lover. Half the world seemed to hate me for it. The other half wanted to know every detail of our lives. And through it all, Julia never wavered. She stood beside me like a shield, daring anyone to challenge what we had. But I wasn't naive enough to think the worst was over. Because real love wasn't just about surviving betrayal or scandal. It was about proving we could endure what came next. And deep down, I knew Claire wasn't finished with us yet. Not by a long shot. You think falling in love with a billionaire would make your life easier. Doesn't. It makes the battlefield bigger, the weapons sharper, the wounds deeper. After that gala, the city split into two camps, those who envied me, and those who despised me. The envy was easy to ignore. The hate wasn't. Anonymous threats filled my inbox. Paparazzi camped outside Julia's penthouse. Old friends stopped answering my calls. At work, whispers followed me down hallways like ghosts. And yet, Julia never faltered. She held me tighter in public, kissed me harder in private, and every time I thought about breaking under the pressure, she'd say, They don't matter. You matter. Only you. But she didn't know the storm brewing outside her carefully guarded world. Because Claire wasn't finished. The first sign was subtle. A leaked email thread between Julia's company and an overseas investor, splashed across financial blogs with accusations of corruption. Nothing that could stick, but enough to rattle board members. Then came the photos, grainy shots of Julia leaving hotels late at night, twisted into stories of secret affairs. Never mind that I was with her those nights, hiding in the shadows of tinted cars. It was war. And Claire was pulling the strings. One evening I found Julia in her office, the city glowing behind her, stacks of files scattered across her desk. She looked exhausted, her sharp edges dulled by weariness. She's coming after you, I said quietly, stepping inside. Julia didn't look up. She's always come after me. This time she's just found a new weapon. I hesitated, then whispered, Me. That made her lift her gaze. Her eyes burned not with anger, but with something fiercer. No. Don't you dare think that. You're not her weapon. You're the reason I'll survive this. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the fear lodged itself in my chest like glass. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Julia had invited me to a charity gala downtown, insisting it would show the world we weren't afraid. I wore a crimson dress she'd chosen, its daring cut making me feel half naked until I saw the pride in her eyes. "You're stunning," she murmured, kissing my shoulder as we stepped out of the car. Let them stare. For a while it almost worked. We danced, we laughed, we pretended the world wasn't sharpening knives. And then Claire arrived. She didn't come quietly. She swept into the room on the arm of some senator's son, her gown glittering like she'd been dipped in gold. Every camera turned. Every whisper rose. But she didn't look at them. She looked at us. And then she made her move. It happened so fast I almost missed it. A chance encounter near the bar. Her glass of champagne spilling across my dress, her voice sweet with mock apology. "Oh, darling, I'm so clumsy," she said, dabbing at the fabric with a napkin she didn't mean to use. Her eyes locked on mine, venom hidden behind the smile. "Funny, isn't it? You always did love being the center of attention." I stiffened. "Leave me alone, Claire." But she leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear. "She won't keep you. She never does. You're just her latest game piece. And when she's done, you'll have nothing." Before I could respond, Julia appeared, slipping an arm around my waist like armor. "Back off, Claire," she said coldly. The room froze. Cameras clicked. The air crackled with tension. Claire smirked, her eyes glittering. "Careful, Julia. Not everyone can be bought. And some of us know how to hit where it really hurts." And then she was gone, leaving me shaking in Julia's arms as the crowd devoured the scene. The ride home was silent. Rain streaked across the windows, city lights blurring like smears of paint. Finally I whispered, "She's right, isn't she? You've had others before me. What makes me different?" Julia flinched just barely. "Don't do this. Answer me." I pressed, my voice cracking. "How do I know I'm not just temporary?" The car slowed, pulling up to her building. Julia didn't move. She sat there, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the rain. Then she turned, and her voice broke in a way I'd never heard before. "Because I've never been afraid of losing anyone until you." The words shattered me. I didn't speak as we rode the elevator, or as we stepped into her penthouse. My hands trembled as she pulled me into her arms, her lips desperate against mine, as though trying to prove what words couldn't. That night wasn't gentle. It was fire and storm. A clash of love and fear and need so raw it left us both breathless, tangled in sheets that smelled of salt and sweat and promises we weren't sure we could keep. And when the dawn came gray and unforgiving, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't afraid of Claire anymore. I was afraid of how much I loved Julia Bennett. The next weeks blurred into chaos. Julia's company teetered under rumors, her enemies circling like sharks. I became tabloid fodder, painted as everything from a gold digger to a political distraction. And through it all, Claire kept striking leaks, whispers, poison dressed as truth. But something else was happening too. The more the world tried to break us, the more we clung to each other. The fiercer Julia fought for me, the deeper I fell. And the deeper I fell, the more I realized this wasn't just revenge anymore. It was love. Messy, terrifying, impossible love. And I knew sooner or later, we'd have to face the truth head on. Because love like this didn't just survive storms. It demanded we walk straight into them. If love is a battlefield, then Claire's final strike was nuclear. The leak wasn't just whispers or blurry photos this time. It was personal. Private emails between Julia and Marat, confessions, vulnerable words meant only for each other splashed across every gossip site within hours. The world devoured them. Headlines screamed. Talk shows dissected every sentence. And the worst part? They twisted our love into a scandal, painting me as manipulative, painting Julia as reckless, painting us as something dirty. For a moment I thought it was over. I sat on the edge of Julia's bed, clutching the phone that wouldn't stop buzzing, tears blurring the screen. "She's ruined us," I whispered. Julia stood by the window, her silhouette sharp against the city lights. But when she turned, her face wasn't broken. It was steel. "No," she said. "She's ruined herself." The next day, Julia did something no one expected. She called a press conference. I begged her not to. "They'll eat you alive," I said, pacing the penthouse like a caged animal. "They already are," she replied calmly. "The only way to win is to stop hiding." And so, hours later, I found myself standing beside her in front of a sea of cameras, my heart pounding so loudly I thought the microphones would pick it up. Julia stepped to the podium, her black suit crisp, her gaze unflinching. "Yes," she began, her voice carrying through the room. "I am in love with her." Gasps. Flashes. A wave of noise crashed, but she held up a hand, commanding silence. "She is not my weakness. She is my strength. And if you think real love can be weaponized, then you've underestimated both of us." Her words cut like lightning, and then she did the unthinkable. She reached for my hand. In front of everyone. I froze. For a heartbeat, fear clawed at me. But then I saw her eyes, not the billionaire, not the untouchable queen of New York business, but the woman who had held me through every breakdown, kissed me like I was worth saving, fought for me when the world wanted me destroyed. And I took her hand. The cameras exploded. But for once I didn't care. Claire didn't win. The leaks backfired. Julia's raw honesty turned the tide. What the world had tried to twist into scandal became something else entirely. A story of defiance, of two women daring to love against the odds. Investors rallied. Julia's company stabilized. The tabloids lost interest, hungry for fresher blood. And Claire? She vanished from the spotlight, her final weapon turned to ash. But survival wasn't the same as healing. That took time. For weeks I struggled with the shadows she'd left behind. The whispers didn't vanish overnight. The fear didn't evaporate just because the headlines moved on. Some nights I still woke shaking, convinced it would all be ripped away again. But Julia never wavered. She was there when I cried, when I doubted, when I lashed out from the pain. She was there when I laughed again for the first time without guilt. She was there when I finally whispered in the quiet safety of her arms, "I love you," and meant it without fear. The rooftop garden was her idea. "Too many people in this city think love is weakness," she said one spring evening, her hands wrapped around mine. "Let's plant something that proves them wrong." So we did. We filled the rooftop with roses and lilies and wildflowers that made no sense together but somehow bloomed anyway. And there among the blooms we carved out a piece of peace. It wasn't grand gestures or perfect nights. It was coffee and pajamas, stolen kisses between meetings, laughter echoing off skyscraper glass. It was learning each other's scars, holding on through storms, daring to imagine a future. It was love. Real, flawed, extraordinary love. On the anniversary of the day I walked out of Claire's apartment with my heart shattered and my world in ruins, Julia brought me to the rooftop at sunset. The city glowed gold beneath us. The flowers swayed in the warm breeze, and she pulled something from her pocket. A small velvet box. My breath caught. Julia. She didn't kneel. Of course she didn't. Julia Bennett wasn't the kneeling type. But her hand shook as she opened the box, and in that tremor, I saw everything: her fear, her hope, her love. "I don't want revenge anymore," she said softly. "I don't want war. I just want you. Forever." The ring sparkled, but her eyes outshone it. And in that moment, with tears streaming down my face, I realized the truth. My fiancée betrayed me. But in losing her, I found the woman who taught me what love really was. I took Julia's hand, the rooftop blooming around us, the city roaring below. "Yes," I whispered. "Forever." And when her lips met mine, it wasn't fire or fury or defiance. It was home. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.